Hey there, welcome to an episode of the Gamers Guild podcast. You can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcast platforms, if you're interested in taking this on the go at least. Otherwise, you can find the episodes here on YouTube a week or two after they release on the podcast platforms. Thank you for spending your time with us, and we hope you enjoy. Hello there. Today is part 2 of 3 of getting some great insights on how the developers at Atomic Mass Games go about building their own rosters. And what is particularly awesome is that today I am joined by Will Shick, the Director of Product Development at Atomic Mass Games, and we're going to talk about his approach to building his team of villains and then even make a roster. My name is Nate, and welcome to the Gamers Guild. And Will, if you don't mind, introduce yourself. I gave a little bit of an intro about who you are and what you do, but tell us a little bit about yourself for the people who don't know who you are.
Sure. So I am the director of product development for Atomic Mass Games. I started as the head of studio, so I was one of the initial 4 people, myself, Marco, Pagani, and Dallas were the 4 folks who started Atomic Mass Games back in 2019. And then Simone Elliott, the incredible and amazing new head of studio, came in. She was always my boss. So it was very natural that she just kind of like stopped focusing on all the studios and came over and started working just with us. Is now head of studio, and I got to get rid of all the business stuff, and I get to focus purely on product creation and development, which is honestly the part that I'm good at and the part that is the most fun for me. So it worked out really well. I was the original designer of Marvel Crisis Protocol. So I did the original design rules document. I still do the vast majority of initial character designs, although we like to really work together with people depending on who loves what character. We talk a lot about like Daredevil is Josh, our art director's like favorite character in the world. So he has thrown his hand in on making Daredevil. So what you see from that is a lot of conversations with Josh about his hopes and dreams. And then like distilling those down into something that works for the game. We've had a lot of input from Dallas on many of the X-Men as he is a super hardcore X-Men fan. And we've also had several characters done by Pagani and others. But for the most part, my role in the game is a lot of like the initial core design. And then I get to go over and talk to Pagani and now our fabulous game dev, Sarah Rowan, who works with Pagani on Marvel Crisis Protocol. And we jam out from those designs something that we think will be acceptable from a rules perspective. So if something is brand new, like a good example, Dr. Voodoo's brother Daniel token was one of those ones that like the initial design was like, it does this. But just saying it does this doesn't actually mean that it works that way. So then we have to talk a lot back and forth about like, how do we do that? How do we accomplish it in rules? And then from there it goes into playtest and stuff. So in addition to working on the game dev side, I also work very closely with sculpting. So I work very closely with Dallas Kemp. I do all of the character concepting and stuff with him. We pick out the costumes. We talk about poses. And that's a team effort as well. But we're primarily the ones responsible for making sure that those decisions get made and then turning them over to Marvel for approvals and things like that. And then, of course, I get to see all the cool sculpts and provide feedback on that. And I also get to work with the art team, the graphic design team on the final product look and everything. So I get to be involved in like everything that leads to a product going to production and then finally getting made, which is just a blast. It keeps me on my toes, and it's very fun to watch these things go from like just a little twinkle in somebody's eye to something that everyone's like losing their minds over on the web. And that's kind of my job. And then I also do a lot of administrative and boring stuff as well, like all leaders and managers have to do, and that's fine as well. You know, it's just part of the gig.
Absolutely. And with all of that in mind, with so many other things going on, thank you for joining me today. And I'm really excited to get some of your insights on how you go about building a roster just for the average game night, knowing how involved you've been with the game throughout its entire lifespan.
I feel like you're really setting people up for disappointment here, because what you're going to learn about me from this is that I'm not a planner. Like I have to do a lot of like long-term strategy and planning in my job, when it comes to my gaming and hobby experiences, I am whatever catches my eye. I'm a kid in a candy store. I'm just like this and this and this. You're like, those are going to taste terrible together. I'm like, I don't care. They look so good. So, if you're hoping to like have the galaxy brain open up during this conversation, it's probably not going to happen, right? You're just going to be like, how does this guy manage to win most of the games on stream? And the fact is that I get really lucky with my rolls a lot of the time.
You can attribute it to luck. We all know you're a secret mastermind or something.
Something. I'm paying them off behind the scenes. I'm like, you can't make it look bad on camera here, Josh. I was like, fine. Internally, Josh is killing everybody.
Man, the times that Josh just popped off with some of those roles is always great to see on stream.
It's funny because like every time, especially recently in the last like 3 or 4 streams he's been on, like when that man is in playtest, his rolls are phenomenal. Like to the point where we're like, you're skewing results. We have to take that roll back. Like you can't roll 12 hits on a 5 strength attack 3 times in a row, Josh. That's not how this game works. You're invalidating testing results. And then he gets on stream and like all of that luck just goes away, just right down the drain. It's amazing.
Poor Josh.
I know. He's a great sport about it though. And he so wants to live his dreams. And for whatever reason, he gets on camera and his dice just like, nah, we're just going to embarrass you today. And he's like, oh.
All right, well, let's get into it. So when you were looking at just making that roster for a game night or an event or whatever it may be, where do you normally begin? Is it with like the affiliation, maybe a particular leader or character, or maybe even the crisis cards?
So like for me, again, like this is probably not going to be like super illuminating because I don't really have a deep answer.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes it's whatever I've recently painted. And, I'm painting characters like nonstop. So it's typically like, oh, I just finished this character and I've wanted to play them for 2 years now. There's this weird thing where it's like you play a character a ton in playtest for us because our development timelines are like 18 to 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
So you play this character and you're like, you can't wait for them to come out. But then there's this big gap period where you don't work on them at all for a while. And then they come out. You're like, oh, I finally get to paint them. Oh, I should play with them now. And so a lot of the times it's just like whatever I just finished recently, I want to get on the table because I just finished it. So like, let's put it on the table. And then if I'm in a rare instance where like I've played the things that I have painted or whatever, or I'm just like thinking about things, it's whatever, it's a lot like movie choice or like music choice. It's what I'm feeling at the time that I'm actually building the list. Am I thinking about the latest and greatest Amazing Spider-Man issue that I just read? Did I just finish X of Swords from Hickman? Did I watch Earth's Mightiest Heroes, that great animated series, which I think is the best one? Hot take there.
I agree with you. As far as the Avengers cartoons, I wish it kept going.
It's amazing. And the other ones have been good too, but that one for me is just like it hit all the right notes. Am I feeling kind of sensitive? Did I just watch Hawkeye last night and maybe have some ideas from that? It's just, or am I looking at my shelf and I'm just like, I haven't played with this character in a while. I really love this character. I should like find a list for them. So I never really delve too deep. Like to me, what is going to make the game fun and enjoyable is just taking the characters that I want to take. And like to go a little deep into that, the reason that's largely one of the driving core pillars of Marvel Crisis Protocol is that we talk about how not every character is the same. There are always going to be characters that are slightly below the scale, like the midline, and slightly above the midline. But our goal is to always keep those like ends as close as possible together. Mm-hmm. I'm making motions with my hands, but we're not on camera, so I just look like a crazy person as I talk to myself. Technology is wonderful, folks. So, like I never concern myself with like what's the most efficient. I've never been an efficiency player. I've always been a what makes me feel happy player. And I'm more than happy. In fact, I even enjoy taking things that might not be the most efficient choices. And then through my player skill, my player choices, and like reacting to what's unfolded on the table, making those lower efficiency choices more efficient. Because if you just look at the numbers, which a lot of folks I think do, and it's very easy to get caught in that trap because numbers are deterministic, right? You can look at a stat and say, this stat is lower, this stat is higher.
Hmm.
But that's like, it's maybe a third, if you want to be super generous, of the overall like aggregate that makes a character a character. And a lot of those portions that make a character are out of your control. How do your dice roll? We just talked about Josh. You can take the most efficient character. If all you can roll or fails, you're never going to win, right? That character is never going to perform for you.
Just bring
Um,
Scarlet Witch. You'll do better.
yeah, see, he needs to play with the Scarlet Witch. She'll do fine. But then you bring Scarlet Witch and all of a sudden you're just rolling blocks. And now you're like, well, okay. So there's ways to mitigate, certain things that you can't control. And then there are things there, but those mitigation things only go so far. So for me, it's like I never get too concerned with the overall, like, what is a character doing? What do they want to do? I always just kind of figure that out on the fly, because to me that's fun. And there are definitely people like Pagani and our dev Michael Plummer, who were very hardcore into competitive tournament scenes when they were playing games and stuff like that, and they still kind of have that brain of, okay, well, if I take this, this, and this, and I practice really hard with it, I'm going to learn this, and then I'll figure out how to like maximize the efficiencies in all of my list. And it's all about what's fun to you, right? Like
Hmm.
if you build a roster in a way that is exciting and enjoyable for you, then you're doing it right. For me, it's just like, I'm just going to grab a bunch of cards and I'm going to throw them together and then I'm going to make it work. And it's going to either be a story and a lot of the times, like once I pick the first 3 or 4 characters, I start to get an idea of the story that I'm telling. And then I start to pick characters based on the story. And that also really influences like what I'm picking. Right. So, I might say, oh, I really want to play with Medusa because I love that character and she's super cool. I've painted like 3 of her now. So I'm gonna use one of my Medusas that I've painted from various streams. Okay, that's cool. Who do I want to go to next? And like either I go down the Inhumans track, or I wind up going down a little bit of an A-Force track, or I do something really weird and I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna do Inhumans versus X-Men. And so I'm gonna take like 2 distinct kind of affiliations that fit that role, but I can also mesh them together because they did kind of work together towards the end when they realized that they weren't all opposed to each other. And
Hmm.
now I get to kind of like start to tell those stories organically and like what I want to do. So to me, it's very much just like, it's no different than when you approach the hobby of painting a miniature. The canvas is the roster, and then everything you throw on it is just your personal touch, like it's your flair. So that was a very long way to say I never have a plan. I just do what I feel like.
Absolutely, I love it. Which kind of throws out any of these next kind of like strategic questions and all
I
that. But I
mean,
but I kind of love it.
sort of, right? I like I know when you talk about like play styles and stuff, right?
Hmm.
There when it comes down to like a choice, because not everything is just I'm just gonna grab these things. Sometimes it is, but there are a lot of times where you get 4 or 5, you get that 4 or 5 characters deep, and then you're like, oh, I don't really have a plan now. Like, what should I do?
Hmm.
And at that point, you start looking at, okay, well, what does this list want to do a little bit? Like, what characters could fill in well? If
Yeah.
you wind up with a bunch of characters, like you wind up with your Medusa, your She-Hulk, your Hela, your Valkyrie, and then all of a sudden you're looking at, you're like, well, I should probably get somebody who can like attack from further than range 3 or away, right? So like maybe I wind up going with a core set Iron Man who can blast fools really well now from range 4. Maybe I go with something else that's going to fill that role, or maybe I just lean super heavily into this is just going to be a list that's going to try to drive straight for your face and
Hmm.
beat it up. Maybe I look for the characters like Magic or something that can teleport friendlies, or maybe I take a Red Skull and I cosmic cube people around. So there are like decisions that get made based on the needs of where the list is going, and there are certain things that every good, I think, well-rounded Crisis Protocol roster wants.
Hmm.
But unlike a player who comes in and says, "What's your goal?" Right? We talk on the hobby streams all the time about like, what's the miniature's destiny? What is your game's destiny? Right? Like, if your destiny is to just like have fun and throw and play characters that you want and tell a crazy Marvel story across the table, and your favorite character happens to be Viper, and you're just going to play with Viper in every list, that's great. Like, do what you want, right? Like, tell those stories. and do that. And I think, if you approach it from that way, you're going to have a good time because you're doing what is true to you. If if you do like wind up going, okay, well, I want to win the local tournament, you gotta think that way, right? Like if the it's the same with hobby. If I'm painting something that I know is going to wind up getting used as background photography or on camera somewhere for the studio use, I spend like 3 times the amount of time futzing over details that I do not care about.
Hmm.
And to be completely honest, and Dallas will tell you this too, right? Like that kind of stuff is a job. Dallas doesn't paint studio level for fun. He paints it because he gets paid to do it. Um, and so but it's the same with a list, right? Like if your goal is to do something that is outside the norm for you or something that you don't find fun, that's fine, but you have to realize that like you're committing yourself to that, right? Like it's a different experience. It might be more work for you or it might not. Like there's certainly artists out there who just love taking all the time in the world to create masterpieces. And I think that there are definitely players out there that we see all the time who love like really crunching the numbers, putting in the work, practicing super hard to create the most efficient, like, dominating list that they can.
Hmm.
So find what makes you excited and what makes you in love with the game and do that. Because there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
I've literally watched players like Tony, who's one of our major playtesters internally. Oftentimes he'll come to playtest and he'll just be like, "Give me the stack of cards," and we're like, "Okay, here you go," and he'll just draw 7 characters out of the stack, and then he'll take the 3 characters that we want him to work on. He's like, "I'm gonna play this," and we're like, "Cool, man." Like, and he does that normally. That's how he plays his games. He doesn't care. He likes just getting the pile of characters randomly and then figuring it out from there. And so it's whatever works for you. But yeah, I think you do. Even if you don't do that stuff during the list, like you figure out your synergies, you figure out like, am I attrition or am I control?
Hmm.
Even if you don't do that after you've built the list, you absolutely need to dive in and go, okay, what does this list do? Like, what am I good at? What am I weak at? How do I want to play around with that? How am I going to mitigate that on the table?
Hmm.
So it's not like you're just like we're just running into the wind and screaming like yay as we roll dice, which you could do if that's what you want to do. But I think for me, the strategy determinations and stuff largely come halfway through or at the end of the list. Once I have those characters in place, the characters will tell me what I need to do with it. And I think the fun of it a little bit, is like it's similar to a player that figures all that stuff out as they build the list or before they build the list. For me, I just like figuring that puzzle out after the list is made.
Okay, that's awesome. And yeah, I definitely understand being able to like kind of you get your maybe core 3 to 5 models, and then you're kind of like, cool, let's start fleshing it out a little bit, figuring out if this team is going to be a little bit more punchy or a little bit more throw, push heavy, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. I guess another question then is once you start filling in the rest of the roster, are you getting pretty focused on getting a lot of value out of the leadership, or do you look at other aspects when you're trying to build around that last few slots?
I think for me, it kind of depends on the leadership, right? Obviously, whenever I'm in an Avengers mood, I know I'm taking Steve Rogers, and so I know that like in the back of my mind, even if I don't intentionally do it, I'm always evaluating like how much do I get out of his leadership because it's so
Hmm.
core. Um, when I play like X Force with Cable, though, I don't care. Everybody can use that leadership. Maybe they can't use it like super well, but they can use it, right? It's just a reroll. It's kind of the same with Black Panther and Wakanda, right? Like, so I think there are leaderships that you want to maximize a lot, and then there are leaderships that are kind of like, okay, this is great. I have this. I can do it. Doctor Strange Defender's leadership is another one for me that I don't build around because, like,
Hmm.
how do you really, right? That one is so like much like rerolls. They're so ubiquitous. It doesn't matter. I will use it when I use it. I don't need to worry about having characters that can maximize it. So I think, I think there's like sometimes you do, and I think there's definitely Miles Morales is another great leader that I think like you kind of want to build around because yeah, you get the one and you can reroll fails and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, if you really want to get the most out of Miles and what he's providing to the team, if you're playing Web Warriors, which if you build into affiliation, you kind of are anyway, like it's a bit of a no brainer
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much spider sense going on with the spiders, weirdly enough.
Shocking.
That I know it's amazing, right? Uh, that you wind up just kind of like there's two different tracks, right? I think the worst thing that you can do from my perspective, and this goes back to the way I like to build lists, is to go, okay, uh, I took Steve. I clearly cannot take any character that doesn't maximize the leadership, even if I want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just it's foolish because that leadership is really good and it will, I mean, it will have an impact on the game. All leaderships probably will. But not at the expense of you taking a character that you want or you having fun with the list, right? I, I've never played a game, I've never won a game and felt like it was a success when I didn't have fun winning,
Mm.
is kind of just the way I look at it, right? Like I will 100% every time take a game that I lose but have a blast with, then take a game that I win through misery or like even a meh. Like I never want to take the time to play a game and at the end of it be like, it was fine. It was fine. How was the game? It was fine. Like, no, 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 no. Please don't. Right? Like you're missing. We get such. See, we're gonna dive into like all this philosophy you never knew was coming because it's early and I'm jacked up on my coffee. But like, we get so few opportunities most of the time to indulge in our hobbies, to play games, to interact with other people, especially now, right? Like, how precious is what we get to do as hobbyists after after the last year and a half, and even now with all of the turmoil and weirdness in a post pandemic or still current pandemic world, I guess really is what you have to say. We've
Mm-hmm.
just adjusted to it. Like anything, like all of life and its moments are precious. Why would you ever settle for it's fine, right? Like I'm not saying that you should be happy all the time or that you should have strong emotions all the time, because if you did, then it wouldn't be happiness, right? Like there has to be a baseline in order for there to actually be like spikes and declines. But to go through something where you're like, this is really fun, and then to just walk away with it being like, it was fine. Did you win? Yeah, it was good. Like, oh, okay. It doesn't sound like it was very fun, right? But like to come away and be like, how was the game? I got my ass handed to me. It was amazing. Magneto threw like the entire world. Hulk smashed and dazed like four people with a thunderclap after. Like it was pandemonium. I was fighting for my life, and I just got rocked. Right? If that's the reaction, like you've won. You've won the game. Period. Because I guarantee your opponent probably had just as much fun. Um, I will take that every time over like I built the most efficient list. I piloted it to victory. I did exactly what I'm supposed to do. It's like, okay, but winning itself is not fun, and I think people forget about that. Like we always we're inclined to believe that the goal is the end point, right? You get to be the best at this, right? Get to monetize this, get to do this, right? The point of like everything in life is the journey. It's the path of getting there, and then the stories you make along the way. There have been games where I've been like, I cannot wait for this to be over because I am not having fun, and it will happen. But I have never once been having a blast, whether I was winning or losing, especially when I'm losing and I'm having a lot of fun. I've never been like, when is this game done? Right? If in the moment you're like, I don't care when this game ends because I'm having such a good time. Like, that's it. That's the point. That is literally the point of these games, is to have an amazing time with the person across the table from you. It has nothing to do with winning or losing, in the end. Like that, it's like a cherry on top. But for me, I will never sacrifice my fun so that I can add another W to the column.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't even remember what you asked before I went on my rant, but there you go. That's my rant. Like this is really like after hours with me,
No,
despite the fact that it's like early morning.
and it works out great. Original question: do you try to build around leaderships? Ultimately, you definitely answered that. There are some leaderships that definitely warrant building around a little bit more. You look at Magneto, you definitely want some characters that can interact with terrain, stuff like that. But kind of you look at
Absolutely.
some of the other ones, you're like, oh yeah, no, like everybody likes to join Green Goblin on the hunt. like just
Yeah.
go for it kind of a thing, which I think is perfect advice. So I've got two more questions, and then we will dive into building your very own roster of villains that will just take on the whim of this morning coffee high. And first of all, do you have a character that you try to splash into many lists as you can? That's just like a personal favorite. I know Venom probably makes it into more lists than he probably should, but at the same time, I love playing him, so no harm.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect. I think that's a perfect answer. Um, do like? I don't think I really have one character that I like to splash in a lot. There are characters that are kind of like my go-to splashes, partially because I just really like them, and partially because I do think that they add interesting value to things. Like, if I'm doing like a bad guy list or a more villain themed list, I almost always will take Crossbones or Taskmaster,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the affiliation. And I mean, Taskmaster's kind of a cheat because he's got the rogue agent thing going on. But like for me, Crossbones is one of those like first love characters where, you know, I don't really care like what your opinion is on the guy. I've been playing him in almost every list since the core set if I'm playing like villains, because for me he's just so iconic of like every Marvel comic ever. Whenever the bad guys got together, like either Taskmaster or Crossbones was always there because
Mm-hmm.
they're mercenaries, and it's just like we need a person. Like who do we get? It's like, well, Crossbones or Taskmaster. Those are your go-to, like they're your midway boss fights for your characters, right? You got to get through those two before you get to like the ultimate villain. They're the penultimate villain, as it were. So I really like diving into those. You know, when it comes to other things, Ghost Rider for me is one that I love splashing in as much as possible because I just love Ghost Rider. Wolverine to me is like the most iconic splash character because he shows up everywhere.
He's
Like,
everywhere anyway. Yeah.
yeah, where has that guy not been in the Marvel universe? Um, I think if there's like a weird one that I always try to kind of like squeeze in, uh, for me, a lot of the times I will try to find a reason to get like Killmonger in because I really love. I mean, I really love that character, especially since kind of the revamp he got through the MCU and stuff like that. I think like um, I just love that transformation and the way they kind of took it. And then Gamora is another one for me that like long time I love the deadliest woman in the galaxy. Like I think she's phenomenal in the comics, and she has so many great scenes throughout like the different history. And you know, she's always treated slightly different, but she's just got this like no BS attitude about everything that I find really appealing. Um, you know, like the opening scene from, oh my gosh, 2014. I think it was the 2014 like Guardians run when Iron Man Tony Stark builds his space armor and goes to space, and he
Mm-hmm.
meets the Guardians for the first time, and he Tony Stark's Gamora, and like you're like, oh, okay, he's being suave, and then afterwards she's just like, this was not what I expected, and he's just really uncomfortable, and they like she just gets up and leaves. I was like, yes, Gamora, put him in his place. You're the best. So like I really like playing her as well. And then Zemo. See, so now I've like picked all these characters. It's very hard for me to choose, but it also just depends. Again, like it's like pick a favorite movie. Like how do I feel? You know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Zemo became. I think Zemo has a special place in my heart because when I did the initial designs for Crisis Protocol, and we started working on it, and everyone was looking at the characters, you know, there were a few characters. Crossbones was one, and Zemo was another, where people were just like, you know, like a lot of the people were just like they had been experienced, like especially Keanu had been experienced through the MCU, and those characters hadn't really been revealed too much. You know, you had a little bit of Brock Rumlow from Captain America 2 and then Civil War, which came later, but he was never really fleshed out. And so, you know, a lot of people are like, who's this Zemo guy? Like what's his shtick? He seems kind of silly. You know, he wears this purple like face mask and runs around with a crown on his head. Like, what's that about? And throughout playtest, he quickly became a favorite because, you know, he's, as the community knows, he's very good at what he does.
Mm-hmm.
And when he pops off, it becomes a thing. And so one of the inside jokes that we started off really quickly, because I was playing one of our very early playtest games we were playing, and Zemo started to get his engine going, where it's like he stabs a guy, he charges over here, and he master swordsman, he stabs, and he steel rushes, and he runs back over, and he does all this stuff. He yo-yos back and forth and just murders the world. And I think I was playing against Pagani at the time, and he said there, he's just like, "What is happening?" I was like, "This is what they call suddenly Zemo!" Ah! And so suddenly Zemo became our thing. So now whenever Zemo pops off, we always scream "Suddenly Zemo!" And a whole like sitcom and all. See, these are the things. These are the reasons that what we get to do as a hobby, as a community, as a game. Like, to me, that's the magic. So I like to put in Zemo a lot because I do like screaming "Suddenly Zemo" at people. Um, when I get to live that dream.
Yep. And speaking of fleshing out web warriors with characters that care about rerolls, Zemo goes right along with that. And he also had a really great representation in the that cartoon, the Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
He did. Yeah, he did. That I thought that, again, I mean, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, to get really off topic. I loved that because I felt like it did such a good job of paying really good homage to the comics that it was influenced by. Mm-hmm. With like storylines that went nowhere and then would suddenly come back like a season later and be really important. And you're like, oh my gosh, they dropped that hint. I thought they forgot about it.
Yeah, right.
Like now it's a big deal. So yeah, so it was really good. I really liked it. And he does have a really good role in that. In the new Avengers cartoon too, he's pretty interesting when he shows up as well. So Zemo, I like that guy. And I don't feel like you can have Captain America without Baron Zemo. Mm-hmm. As much as Red Skull and Captain America get top billing, like I think Zemo is like the better Cap adversary. Hot take.
Ooh,
I know.
Cool. So last question, then we'll dive into building our own roster full of evil characters. Sounds like Crossbones and Zemo are going to make it, but
it might.
When it comes to the crisis selection part of the roster building, do you usually try to keep threat totals similar so that you can try to have this like ideal list, or do you care maybe about the number of extracts or the layout of a secure?
Yeah, so there's not going to be a Galaxy Brain moment here. I look at the crises that I think fit the narrative of my roster.
All right.
Like, so if I wind up building like a more mutant themed roster, I typically take senators and mutant madmen and things like that. And then obviously it's hard to fill out everything with something that makes thematic sense. So what we do a lot, if you watch our games on stream, a lot of the times we'll be like, we're playing these crises, but we've reimagined them as being this. The last game that Josh and I played, we had Legacy Virus and Shield base on the moon, or Sword base on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, this doesn't. Why are the X-Men and the Criminal Syndicate, like, why would they be on the moon? The X-Men go to the moon all the time. So we kind of reimagined it as, the Criminal Syndicate had broken into the X-Mansion and we're fighting in the Danger Room, and everything's gone haywire, and and the Criminal Syndicate's trying to steal, the Legacy Virus from them. Because it's like that's what the crisis cards are intended to not only give you your objective for the game, but they also they're the prompt. They set the stage for the game. So I really like picking crises that I feel like make sense for the rosters that I've built. And it does kind of matter when it comes to the point totals,
Mm-hmm.
I may make adjustments if like I really want to take, say, a 14 threat crises because I feel like it's really thematic, but I noticed that I'm not going to be able to build 14 threat. I might go back and either like tweak a character, like pull a 2-pointer or something like that, or I might just not take that crisis. But I don't, much like with characters, I usually don't sweat the efficiency angle of it. I just simply say, okay, which ones seem like they'll be great for what I want to do? If I take, and a lot of the times I find that kind of approach usually works out pretty well. If I take a very aggressive, like want to beat them up, roster that's full of characters that want to get in your face, Hammers is a great one. I'll take Hammers because I want to roll more dice. That's fantastic to me. Yeah. But yeah, I don't typically worry a lot about things. I do oftentimes lean towards So as you've probably figured out, like to me, it's the experience. To me, it's the story. I'm less concerned about like optimization.
Hmm.
So things like gamma shelters, or ones that have like they don't have a lot of bells and whistles. They're not super exciting from a like what's happening on the table. They present interesting challenges and stuff, but they're overall they have a minimal impact on like the craziness. Um, those ones I'll often shy away from. I fully understand and embrace like why they're good choices and why certain lists really want to take them, but for me, they just wind up being pretty dry. Like, okay, I love the fact that like if I have a very throwy list, if I'm playing gamma, I'll purposely just throw you into the poison cloud. Like I'll throw you into the gamma cloud because I think it's hilarious when you take damage from it. And I
Hmm.
don't even care if that's the efficient, like to me, that's what you should be doing, right? Like that's the story that you want to tell. And so I kind of look for those opportunities where it makes halfway decent sense to be like, I'm just gonna waste my time knocking you out into the gamma like poison so that I can laugh at you as you take damage. Um, but I like things like Terrigen Mists and Mayor Fist vows to find witnesses and like the ones that are just kind of wacky. I always talk about how some of my favorite crises are from the Infinity War campaign, which is the
Hmm.
organized play kit, because we were kind of able to go off the chain with those because they didn't have to be competitively balanced. They were a little more wacky, taking control of somebody's character because they have all the mind shards, but you control the throne. Like that's great.
Hmm.
Teleporting back and forth across the table is always fun. So things like inheritor portals, I think, are pretty cool because there's like always that unknown. I like gambling. I like risk in my games. I like the unknown, so I'll lean towards those. And it's because again, like to me, I want to set up an experience that's just going to be fun. It's not going to be fine. It's going to be fun. Win or lose, it's going to be fun. Um, and that's the mentality I go into the games with. That's the mentality that I try to make sure that my opponent has fun as well, because to me, it's a together thing. But winning is like that's a byproduct of everything else that happens. So there's not a whole lot of like clever planning or sinister tactics that go on. Like if I take these crises, I can do this, and yeah, that's not my role. In playtest, I'm not the turn one guy. I'm not
Hmm.
typically the person who comes up with the turn one play that then we go, oh well, we have to change this. There are other people who are way better at that. And I think that's the strength of having a robust community and why you want to have a lot of play testers and a lot of different perspectives is there's no wrong way really to play a game like this, provided that you and your opponent, and especially your opponent, is having a good time.
Hmm.
The only way, we've talked about this I think a couple times, the only way to really like play wrong in my opinion is when you go and you say I'm going to make the person across the table miserable.
Yeah.
Like my goal is to make sure they don't have fun, and I'm like, well, you should not be here because that's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Don't,
Like
don't go steal a kid's ice cream cone. Just yeah.
yeah, you you can't play the game if nobody will play with you. So you probably should be concerned about if the person across from you is having fun. And that doesn't mean, you got to like, that doesn't mean that you have to play less hard, quote unquote. It just means that, you should be engaging with them. You should be, joking. You should talk to each other and like maybe tell a story, laugh with them, empathize with them when they have a bad role, celebrate them when they have a great role. Do think,
Yep.
just
Show
be a human
concern.
being.
It's like, oh man, like I totally forgot that Crossbones is going to activate after
Yeah.
Sin. Like, oh goodness, like this was not part of the plan.
Yeah. It's just, just like engage with the person, not the table, right?
Hmm.
Like you'll play the game, but you need the person. So yeah, so that's my approach to crisis selection. I don't sweat it too much. I take the things that I think are thematic and that to me are make fun experiences. And if I wind up picking crises that are specifically challenging to my roster, and they do come up, which has happened before, that to me is just more exciting. But I'm kind of weird in that I like underdog situations. I like when things go horribly awry and you have to figure your way out because I like solving puzzles. But unlike doing the puzzle from the front end, like seeing the galaxy brain moment,
Hmm.
my galaxy brain moments happen in the moment, right? It's a reactive process. It's not proactive. And that to me is like when I super love something. Like when I fall in love with something, it's because I wound up in a situation that I had to like work my way out of, and I was able to do it, or I was able to get close with the pieces that I had. You know,
Hmm.
sometimes you don't always succeed, but if you learn something along the way and you unlock things as you go, that's very exciting. It's when things are rote that, it's just like, I'm kind of out. Like you've lost my interest, and that's not true for everyone, but that's okay.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive into building a roster.
Let's build a roster. Okay,
So where would you like to begin?
we're going to start with Kingpin.
All right.
Yeah. So I've been playing a bit of Criminal Syndicate lately, especially if you watch the stream game that I played against Josh. I took Criminal Syndicate. I also took Juggernaut. It was super fun. We can't add Juggernaut yet, unfortunately, but if we were in Magical Christmas Land, I think it would definitely be a rendition of the roster that I just played because I had a lot of fun with it. But we're going to take Kingpin, and then we're going to take Green Goblin. And the reason that we're going to
Ooh.
do that is because if we're going to play bad guys, let's go all in. Let's do Spider Foes and Criminal Syndicate,
Add some
because
variety. I like it.
there's a lot of great crossover as well with those two affiliations. So I think we can really come up with something that's pretty good. And they'll look good together on the table. So yeah, so we'll pull those two as kind of like our starting point, and then from there, I think like overall, we'll lean more towards like the Criminal Syndicate kind of side. So Mysterio will be our great crossover. Plus, Mysterio's a blast to play.
Hmm.
That'll allow us to take Grand Illusion, which is super fun because then and plus when you play Mysterio, you get to talk like all like evil wizardly like, like you get to make like voices like you're in a fishbowl. Like it's great. Who doesn't love that? So that brings us to what, three. Craven the Hunter. I'll do that for my boy Pagani because that was one of his designs, and I think it came out really weird and cool. So I think that like gives us enough crossover. Bullseye now being a threat too seems like a really solid choice, and
So
also
good.
he's like classic Kingpin lackey, so we definitely need to go there. Um, so what is that? Are we at four now?
We're at
Five. We're at
five.
five. Perfect. We're at five. Uh, who do we want? I mean, I feel like Venom's got to go in there because we talked about Venom. Um, we'll grab Dr. Octopus for number 7 because that'll give us well laid plans, which is just amazing when it goes off. Not going to take Carnage because for me, like Carnage and Venom don't go on the same team.
I
I just
respect that.
like
Yeah.
it kind of they work together once, but it kind of like it irks me.
And
To like
even when
put
they
them.
worked together, they ended up fighting at the end. Like
Yeah,
they're
they immediately broke up. Like it doesn't work. Hood has been like one of my favorites, and I love transforming characters, so we'll throw him in. And that gets us to 8.
Mhm.
Man, I know we talked a lot about Crossbones and Taskmaster, but right now I'm like I don't think I'm feeling them. It's shocking. I think we're gonna go. I think we're gonna go with Baron Zemo as like one of our splashes, and then man, who's gonna be our last? Our last like wild splash. Let's do. I'm just going through like all of the options here.
There are so many now.
You know what? Let's do Black Dwarf because I feel like Black Dwarf doesn't get the credit that he honestly deserves, especially with the changes that have happened recently to size 3, like size 4 reductions and pushes.
Hmm.
And if you're talking about Criminal Syndicate wanting just a beefy boy to sit on a point and like never move, Black Dwarf,
Black Dwarf is the definition of beefy boy.
he's that man is never dying. Like, so I think I'm going to throw in Black Dwarf just as a dark horse candidate because I think he works really well in Criminal Syndicate.
Hmm.
And I think he got some stealth buffs that people still haven't quite appreciated yet. And is he top shelf? I'm not claiming that, but I do think that he's got some strong play, and he's a threat that's difficult to ignore, but also difficult to deal with. unless you really want to focus on him. And he's just he's just a huge, cool miniature. So
yeah, dude comes in bringing a battle axe that's the size of most other characters. Like, yeah,
his forearm is the size of Iron Man. I mean, come on. You're gonna be scared when that guy shows up. He's like, "Oh, excuse me, sir. Let me back up here." Yeah, I like that. I think this will be fun. I'll be honest, Hela kind of jumped out at me as like, Hela and Loki are ones that I'll also splash in quite a bit. Loki, of course, like to me, he fits in anywhere because he's the god of mischief. But I really like Hela too. I know that not everyone's super Hela fan, but I think every time I've used her, it's been to great effect. She is pretty straightforward, but like what she does exceptionally well. And I always feel like her soul mechanic makes you feel like a boss, you know, when you're just like, I'll spend a soul to boost my attack, and then I'll take your soul twice because I dazed you and I used soul or claim soul.
Yep.
Like once you get that little battery going, you kind of feel like a god because you're just like, I'll spend them, I'll get them back. I'll spend them, I'll get them back. So it was great. But yeah, we're going Black Dwarf. I think we're going Black Dwarf. Criminal Syndicate Black Dwarf seems really good. And plus, I don't have to suffer for these choices because I'm told that you're the ones who are playing with it. So you can tell me later. You'd be like, I don't know why you did this to me.
I was about to say we're gonna give them a whirl. It's gonna be a blast. I'm really
literally
excited for that down the road.
All right, so let's see. Where do we want to go next? We've got our 10 characters. We got Spider Foes and Criminal Syndicate. So you want to do crisis cards or team tactics next, Nate?
You were the captain of this ship. You drive the boat wherever you want to go.
All right. Well, let's do crisis cards. So I think that we want, let's see, for extracts, I think we want hammers because we want to beat some fools up.
Absolutely.
Montesi's kind of interesting, but I don't know if I feel that one. I think we'll go extremist target U.S. senators, which is 14, which is kind of low, but we've got a pretty good spread of folks that I think we can be okay with it.
Yeah, there's not really any like extremely expensive threat wise characters, so you can get 14 pretty easily.
I thought for a second that I was just gonna be like, and throw in Dormammu as the dark horse, and now we're triple affiliated. I didn't do that. I didn't go that far. And then I like Spider Infected a lot, but I'm not entirely sure if I love it with the factions that we picked. So I think I'm gonna go struggle.
Okay.
I don't know if you're going to build super wide, but there's a lot of beef in that list. And so if you start stacking a ton of cube like fragments, like I think a lot of those characters can manage 2 cube fragments, especially like your Black Dwarf and like your Kingpin. So if you're transferring them like to your beefier characters, I feel like you can hold more of them. Whereas I'm not entirely sold on Montesi formula because I don't know if you only want 3. Now you could do Legacy Virus and pull the really dirty play that I did on Josh on the stream and just be like, Criminal Syndicate loves that one because if you can get them, they're just passing it back and forth. And it is a 19, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, let's do Legacy Virus. I think Legacy Virus is it. That seems like something the Criminal Syndicate would want to steal. And if you're playing Spider Foes, it's like, you know, you're trying to get Goblin Serum or whatever. So I'm down with this.
All right, I like it.
Yeah. So we're gonna do Senators, Legacy Virus, and Cube.
Hammers.
Struggle for the Cube.
Oh
yeah.
no,
or
no
hammers. No, hammers. Yeah,
hammers over cubes. All right.
We talked about hammers. It was such an easy choice that I didn't even have to think about it. And now, and that gives us what, 18, 19, and 14. That's a nice crazy spread. We'll do it all. It's fine. Okay, let's look at our secures here. So obviously we have Mayor Fisk, and he's vowed to find that witness, so we better put that in.
Only makes sense.
Yeah, Mayor Fisk vows to find missing witness. He's on the streets doing it himself. Okay, zero question. We have to take that one.
There is a reason that they are terrified. Like, yeah,
Yeah, that's right. This is how it works here. Uh, I always like. I think Portal's over on City with Spider People. Got to take that. Not only is that one just fun for its unpredictability, but also, I mean, if you're playing Spider Foes, when are they going to show up? They're going to clean the streets of all these Spider People. Are just infesting the city. You got to call in the pros, right?
mm-hmm.
You don't want to have an infestation of Spider People. That's just bad. That lowers your property values like nobody's business.
Yeah, I'm kind of expecting, like, just as a whole, like New York, how does it keep property value in the Marvel
Oh,
universe?
it's damage control. They are the true heroes of the Marvel universe because without them and their free services to the city, it would be over. I would never own a car in New York anyway, but
Yeah.
especially in Marvel New York, because that car is not going to last. You're going to maybe get to drive it once. You will park it on the side of the street and it will just be crushed.
Yep, it's just like, well, what level of insurance do you have? Do you have mutant insurance? Do you have Avenger insurance?
Oh man, if you had to cover it based on character arc run, you would be so broke. But I'm sorry, sir, but photos clearly indicate that Colossus and Juggernaut crushed your car, and you are only covered for Avengers villains.
Yep, so like Hulk crushing your car just doesn't cover it. I'm sorry.
That's right. That's right. You did not get the hero indemnity, so you're out. Let's go Deadly Meteors for the other secure.
All right.
Or we could do Riots. Do we want to do Riots?
I feel like you might want to do Riots just because it plays to Kingpin's leadership a little bit more.
It does. It does. Yeah, because then we can heal and all. Yeah, let's do Riots. We'll make the ones. Riots is kind of boring. It's not super boring. I will accept it. I find it better than Gamma Shelters personally, in terms of the story that it's telling and kind of like what it does to the game. So I'm in for Riots. I'm in for Riots. We got a lot to like balance anyway. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine. All right, team tactic cards. Well, let's knock out the easy ones. So we know we have to take well-laid plans because we specifically took Doc Ock and Green Goblin just for that.
Yeah.
And the best part is, since it's unaffiliated, if you manage to squeeze both those into your criminal syndicate list, oh my gosh, is that like so juicy?
That's some dirty plays right there. I love it though.
like I'm already loving just taking things from you, but now I'll just have this card that'll maybe will take everything from you. It's great. Okay, so we have that. I really like Shadow Organization. I don't use it all the time, but I feel like the super stealth is pretty solid. So I would definitely add that. All according to plan. I always loved the dream of that one, but I feel like so often it's not usually that important to Criminal Syndicate because they don't typically play super wide. And I don't think our roster is really built that way. So I might leave that one out. I will always take Cruelty because I feel like that is just, I mean, it's so iconic of that affiliation, like hitting somebody and then getting to hit them again.
And I love the theme of it. It's like, oh yeah, this isn't actually attack. This is like that little like extra twist that is going on in the backstory. It's not on the table, but like Bullseye's like, oh yeah, and I killed Elektra. Sorry about it.
That's right. He's like, you better go check on your lady, Murdoch. And he's like, what? No! It's a very what's in the box moment. All right, so we have those two. Like Spider Foes wise. What do we got? I will not force you to take Fearful Symmetry because I don't think there's a Spider-Man in the other list, but I'll be honest, if I'm taking Kraven, I'm taking Fearful Symmetry most of the time. The Grand Illusion, we got to take that one. We talked about that, but I mean, Mysterio, Grand Illusion, super amazing.
Yep.
Sadly, we didn't take lizard, so there's no monkey brain as lizard home, which is another just super fun one to say.
That, that it is. Let's see. You've got Lethal Protector for Venom is available.
Oh yeah, we got to take that. You can't take a venom without a lethal protector. Zero question on that. Marked for Death is always a classic and very thematic, so we should pull that one. Plus, when you run into those obnoxious spider peoples, you can just get rid of that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I think we probably want. We're looking at our. If we're looking at our restricted card choices here, I feel like Criminal Syndicate kind of wants the healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take. I always go between med pack and patch up. I feel like personally I like med pack because it's a little more flexible, even if it's not as potent.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do med pack. What do we have?
I think that
5?
oh no, I have them all spread out. I've got currently Shadow Organization, Cruelty, Grand Illusion, Lethal Protector, March for Death, Well Laid Plans, and Medpack for 7 total.
7, perfect. All right, we only need 3 more. You were saying about Medpack though?
Oh, yeah, just with a few more of the D securities, you're a little bit more spread out anyway. So somebody being able to just patch themselves up is, or Medpack themselves rather than rely on somebody else for the patch up is nice.
Are we limiting ourselves to? All right, so I would like to take fallback, but I realize that where we live, it's currently not available. So maybe we'll leave that one off. But I think fallback is also really dirty with Criminal Syndicate. Being able to spend power to advance away from the attacking character short is it's pretty good. It's pretty good. All right, let's see. What else do we want to take here? I always love this is another one. I love the dream of Recalibration Matrix, but I almost never play it. Because typically I get to there and I'm just like, the role wasn't either I have a really terrible role, but I have no power. And it's just like, well, not playing it now. Or I have like a mediocre role and I do have the power. And I'm like, do I really want to gamble it? Probably not. Disarm is an amazing card. I think that one definitely needs to go in.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorites that I try to sneak in whenever I can.
Yeah, it's super strong. See, normally I would probably for my other restricted card, I would take Brace just because it's so like universally applicable. But you let it slip that like Pagani went on the Midnight Sun side, and so I'm like, if he really went into Midnight Suns, like I don't know if we need Brace. I'm kind of cheating now, you see. Now I'm getting
advantage of going second. Like he got his first pick, and now you have a little bit of inside knowledge.
That meta mind here of like what's going on. Blind Obsession is pretty strong and very thematic.
So I will never argue against Blind Obsession.
Yeah, maybe that's where I'm going with this. I think Blind Obsession. I love Kick 'em while they're down, partially because the artwork totally matches what we're doing. But I don't know. I mean, Kick 'em while they're down, like Green Goblin. Green Goblin can kind of play off that. Mysterio, not so much. Like who else do we have? We don't have a lot of special conditions going on here. So I think we got to go. Yeah, I think we got to go with the first one.
That would be the
Blind Obsession. Yeah, let's do Blind Obsession. Final answer, Blind Obsession. I'm happy with this. I think this is going to be fun.
It certainly looks it. So just to go over, I've got Shadow Organization, Cruelty, Grand Illusion, Lethal Protector, March for Death, Disarm, Well Laid Plans, Blind Obsession, Medpack, and there's still one more slot. I've got the fallback with a question mark.
Oh yeah, it's true. We can't do the fallback because it's not not out yet. I mean, it's in my binder, but my binder's cheating because I get bulk samples, and I think we take Brace, even though it probably isn't applicable. But if I was just building this list to go in blind, and I didn't know which affiliation Pagani had like leaned into,
Mm-hmm.
I would probably take Brace with this list because like you've already got a bunch of beefy boys. Just having that extra insular, like that extra layer of protection against damage, just makes them that much more beefy. And I won't
Absolutely.
make you take Fearful Symmetry. Honestly, at this point, I'd be like, I have the 9 that I want. I'm just going to take Fearful Symmetry.
You know what? That's why
But
we have 10 instead of 8 now.
that's why we have 10. Exactly. I'll play one down for that hope of like someday living. I will be honest. We've talked about Fearful Symmetry a lot. I have gone into so many games being like, I'm going to do this, and I have yet to live that dream. But it is a dragon I'm willing to chase until the end of my days. Like one of these days, I will pull it off. I tried really hard in that game against Pagani that we did on stream, but
Mm-hmm.
it just never worked out. He did not cooperate with me, and I found it to be very rude.
Yes, how dare he not
How
walk his Spider-Man into a trap?
I don't know. How dare he? How dare he not play to the narrative that we all know actually takes place?
Awesome. Well, this is a fantastic dual affiliation full of ne'er-do-wells. Uh, I'm excited to see this masterpiece on the table now.
I am fascinated to see what poor soul who gets this thing does with it. I think we've got something pretty strong. It's definitely not the most eccentric roster I've ever built. I think it has legs, but it's always interesting to watch somebody take something that you've made and then try to apply sense out of it. And I bet you they'll probably take it they'll probably take it in directions that I wouldn't. And I think that's the other really cool thing that I've so much enjoyed about Crisis Protocol is like, even if you just take somebody's roster, the way that you will manage what's there, it can be wildly different, right? There's so many different options and opportunities. And that goes back to, the more than 2/3 of the game that you can't control outside of roster building.
Mm-hmm.
Which crises come up? What's your threat value? What does the table look like? Where's the terrain? All of this stuff. And I think that's really exciting. But again, it goes back to, shockingly enough, as one of the core designers of the game happens to do a lot of things that I think are fun. So, I know the secret's out. It's so terrible. So terrible. Personal bias is everywhere, Nate. That's the end of it.
That's all. Like you have a perk of the job, you use the perk. Nobody judges you for it.
So,
Awesome.
yeah, dope. All right, I think did we cover all the questions? We've got a roster. I'm excited to see how it does.
Everything is set and ready to go. So thank you again for coming on. This was an absolute blast to both pick your brain about the roster construction, but also to see you just kind of on a whim churn out a roster that looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to put down on the table.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. This was definitely an experience that I've not gone through before. I've never been put on the spot to be like, build something now, and then gotten to show just how completely unorganized I am when I do that. This is just a true insight into every Crisis Protocol roster I built. Honestly, every roster I build for any game. This is pretty much my approach.
Yeah,
What's cool?
I'm pretty
what
sure
do
I heard
like?
your like binder turning pages looking through.
Oh yeah, no. I was definitely flipping through the binders. I had my affiliation list up. I was flipping through binders. I was looking at my shelf full of miniatures, and I was just like, all right, well, that looks cool. That'll look good together. Let's do this. And then we figure out how it plays later. That's my strategy.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, if you guys were not aware, the whole point of this and the previous episode of podcast is that for the third installment, I and one of my other friendly local gaming guys are going to put these two rosters head to head on the table and see how that plays out, which is something I'm really excited for. I've never played a roster that somebody else has built. So try to figure out build a puzzle out of the pieces that have been given to us will be a lot of fun.
Dope. Well, I'm excited to see it. Godspeed and good luck. And I look forward to doing this again.
Absolutely. Thank you all for checking out this second episode of the Gamers Guild podcast. I am really excited to see where this gets to go and what it can become. In our next episode, I will be joined by at least some of what will be the regular hosts as a bonus episode, as we also begin a series that will take a look at each individual affiliation, covering everything from play style, a few good boxes to pick up for the team, and some cool plays to try out on the table. Also, be sure to go over to the YouTube channel so that you can see this list and the roster that Will Pagani made last week go head-to-head in a battle report for office bragging rights. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, keep on gaming.